centuries, the River Thames has been a hard-working and vital waterway, carrying huge quantities of goods right into the very heart of London. But few of London's busy population have known the river really well. There are many surprising secrets to discover. Not many explore the upper reaches at Teddington, Henley and beyond, where in the colourful early morning tranquillity only the royal swans create a few gentle ripples. The world's largest empire was once governed from here at the Houses of Parliament. The chimes of Big Ben became one of the most famous man-made sounds on earth. London's legendary red buses packed these famous streets. And there were some buses that would, for those that knew, take them to a very different part of London, a world of its own far outside the city's ancient walls. This was the place where all the ships in the world came together, a smoky collier from the north. The Royal Mail Line's Highland Princess, on her way to the Royal Docks, passes a P&O cargo liner outward bound for the Far East. Small tugs hurry to greet their many charges. A coaster arrives from the continent. And a cargo liner comes in from Sweden. The Lake Winnipeg from Canada. Cunard's Asia makes her way upriver to the Surrey docks with a cargo of timber and wheat. A posse of sun tugs wait at the ready.
That's the Highland Princess, all right.
Gravesend calling Sun 16. Gravesend calling Sun 16. Over.
Hello, Gravesend. 16 answering, over.
The Highland Princess is at the bottom of the reach. Go up with her to King George Dock. Sun 17 will be the other tug with you. Got it all right? Over and down. Albert Dock 2278.
King George Dockmasters here. Good morning.
Gravesend here, sir. Highland Princess is on her way up.
All right. Well, the two sons with the Asia, I want them in dock. I'll have the Walbrook down here on the lock when she comes to the Highland Princess, and I'll have the two sunboats in with her. They'll take her right through to F Victoria. Now, will you tell your lads on the lock?
All right. Okie doke. Goodbye.
A seagull could have flown for 11 miles upriver and never have left Dockland. Londoners could live in the city all their lives and never know of the existence of this strange, self-contained world right on their back doorsteps. There were more waterways here than streets. Large storerooms took the place of houses. Trains steamed down the middle of the roads, and the long lines of empty cars weren't parked, They were newly made in Great Britain, awaiting export to far-off corners of the world. The docks were made to berth every ship that ever was. Bugsby's Reach and Bow Creek looped north and south below Canning Town. The Blackwall Tunnel ducked deep into the darkness under the Greenwich Meridian. Round and about, Poplar, Millwall and Limehouse, Wapping Old Stairs and Cherry Garden Pier. The 45 miles of dock quays were designed to accommodate every type of ship and cargo. While the Thames rises and falls 20 feet every 12 hours, the docks were maintained at a constant high water. Ships were slowly floated up through locks from river level to dock level. Every day, 500 million gallons of water were pumped to keep the vast area of over 700 acres of docks at a fixed height. London and St Catherine docks were the nearest to the city, half a mile below London Bridge. They catered for the coastal and continental trade. Opened in 1828, they were accessible to all ships then afloat. Vessels of up to 4,000 tons could berth there. The extensive warehouses also stored goods brought up from the lower docks. Next came the Surrey docks, the only docks on the Surrey side of the river. The main entrance to these was 80 feet wide and was used by ships trading with Canada, America and the Baltic, with cargoes of timber, cheese, bacon and fruit. It also handled the whole of the softwood trade, with 10 basins dedicated solely to timber cargoes. The docks could take ships of up to 10,000 tons. The Greenland dock was so named because originally it was the centre of the Greenland whaling trade. It was the site of the first commercial dock ever constructed and was used by Cunard and other liners of up to 15,000 tons. About 3 miles away were the West India and Millwall docks. Opened in 1802, they had entrances 80 feet wide. Ships using those docks traded with the West Indies, Mauritius, Persia and the Canary Islands, with cargoes of sugar, rum, timber, grain, canned goods, turpentine, copper, molasses, cork, pitch, dates, groundnuts, oak, rubber and lentils. These docks originally had the monopoly in handling all the ships and cargoes from the West Indies and could accommodate vessels of 16,000 tons and over. The East India docks at Blackwall opened in 1806. They owed their existence to the old East India Trading Company, which had a complete monopoly over trade to and from India, the East Indies and China. Ships of a still greater tonnage used what was the largest stretch of artificially enclosed dockwater in the world, the Royal Group of docks. These included the Royal Victoria, Royal Albert and King George V docks. Victoria was the first to be completed and opened in 1855. The docks had up to 27 feet depth of water, with several entrances ranging from 80 feet to 100 feet wide. They could accommodate as many as 60 ships at the same time, handling all types of food and general cargoes, and trading with South America, the North Atlantic ports, Australia, New Zealand, Africa and Bermuda. These docks were used by the large ocean-going ships and could take vessels of over 30,000 tons. 25 miles from the Thames estuary are the docks nearest to the sea, Tilbury Docks, which had the largest entrance, 110 feet wide. They also had the deepest water of all the docks and accommodated the largest passenger and cargo liners, mostly engaged in the Far Eastern trade. They were also used for cruising and daily services to the continent. A good deal of cargo was discharged into barges and lighted up the river to the port's warehouses. Adjacent to Tilbury docks was the river cargo jetty for the use of ships discharging only part of their cargo. The early morning sounds of heavy-booted feet upon cobbled roads heralded the arrival of the thousands of people who worked all those docks. There were so many different skills: the dockers, tallymen, stevedores, hatchmen, checkers, samplers, porters, shunters, yardmasters, shipwrights, warehousemen, tacklemen, timber porters, freshwater men, blacksmiths, boiler makers, masons, bricklayers, joiners, carpenters, ship's chandlers, gangers, lighter men, crane men, tractor men, dock watchers, needlemen, ship repairers, superintendents, tugboat men, pilots, customs officers, office workers, supply lorry drivers, as well as the thousands of seamen who crewed the vast armada of ships constantly waiting to be worked. An endless stream of lorries rumbled in and out of the dock gates, piled high with their precious loads of exports and imports. Each lorry had to be checked for contraband. In addition to the busy road traffic, the port had its own trains puffing their way around the docks and moving loads in and out all over the country. The Highland Princess was rudely woken from her sleep as men started work with winches, cranes, blocks, runners, tackles, pinch bars, rollers and swings. Bales of cotton were going off to the barges on the river and carcasses of meat to the quayside on shore. For some ships this was very much their home port, but so many others came to London from every maritime nation on earth. At any one time, there'd be hundreds of them, all receiving dedicated service from the army of dockside workers. The herd of swinging cranes at the water's edge, working tirelessly to satisfy the huge need to fill and empty the ship's massive holds. Just as all the machinery and equipment had to be kept in good working order, those thousands of men had to be fit and strong to cope with the physical exertion in all types of weather. As well as handling their many cargoes, inevitably ships also had to be repaired at the docks. There were 10 dry docks where this very specialised work was carried out. The dry dock at Tilbury was 110 feet wide and over 750 feet long, big enough to handle the biggest of the passenger liners using the port. The largest liner ever to use the Royal Docks was Cunard's 39,655 gross ton Mauretania, seen here arriving for the start of her second voyage to New York in August 1939. But with the imminent outbreak of the Second World War, she was considered to be too great a target to be allowed to return. Although the Port of London was nationalised in 1909, private enterprise still provided the facilities for coaling ships, making them ready to return to sea. More modern oil-burning ships were refuelled from tank barges equipped with special pumping machinery. The logistics of running the port were huge. There was warehouse accommodation for over 1 million tons of goods, including cold storage for the meat that the docks railways distributed. Ships had carried their huge cargoes of meat for thousands of miles, from such places as New Zealand and Argentina. Now came the unloading in the royal docks and the complexities of distribution. With its vast network of railways and roads, the Port of London was the biggest freight distribution centre in the world. Thousands of vans and lorries of every description entered the port's many docks every day. This huge administrative machine had to run like clockwork, and for security, each lorry and van was required to have its own dock and customs passes. As well as being the biggest port in the world, it was also the best equipped, enabling it to handle the many millions of tons of goods that arrived and left the port every year extremely efficiently. There were well over 1,500 of the very latest in electric and hydraulic cranes in the docks. They could swing as much as 3 tons at a time of perishable cargo, such as butter, fruit, meat and cheese, from ship to quay, into barges and onto vehicles for urgent cold storage. Smaller ships, such as coasters, used their own on-deck derricks to handle cargo. And specially designed conveyor belts speedily shifted uncrated bananas at the fruit berth. A floating derrick of 150 tons capacity could get to any part of the port to deal with difficult loads. It was as high as London's famous Monument and could handle such massive cargoes as engines, funnels, locomotives and boilers. This boiler, for example, weighed 80 tons. There were ships from Sweden, Russia, Norway, from America, from Denmark, and whalers from the Arctic seas, vessels from all parts of the world coming and going, providing the essential livelihood for millions. Sometimes, after dangerous voyages through the Baltic's winter seas, ships would barely make it to the safety of their berths. These ships would bring into London 2.5 million tons of timber a year, fir, pine and spruce, from Finland, Sweden, Russia, America and the Arctic coast. The centre of all this trade was at the Surrey docks. Barges were used for transporting lesser quantities of cargo. Close by, on the Grand Surrey Canal, special factories and wharves were built, with over 140 acres of covered and open storage. Altogether, there was capacity at any one time for over 500,000 tons of timber. More wool was handled by the Port Authority than any other organisation in the world, amounting to 1/4 of the world's wool trade. Once again, special equipment had been designed for the port to facilitate the handling of bales. Electric wool pilers, for example, which were used to speed up the process of stacking. There was storage accommodation for over 1 million bales and show space for over 60,000 bales. Sales were held 6 times a year at the Wool Exchange. Before a sale, buyers inspected the lots and fixed their prices for bidding. Port Authority experts weighed and sampled for the trade. Wool came from Australia, New Zealand, South America, Asia Minor and South Africa. Australia's wool trade was founded on those London sales, shipping about 1 million bales a year, the fleeces of over 50 million sheep. Every year, the port handled 3/4 million tonnes of frozen and chilled meat, equal to 27 million carcasses, 3/4 of Britain's annual import. This cargo was mostly handled in the Royal Group of docks, which had specially equipped berths and cold stores. The largest cold store had incredible capacity for over 250,000 carcasses. Trains ran straight into the cold storage warehouses and, in their specially equipped insulated railway vans, took supplies straight to London's famous Smithfield Market and out across the whole of the country. 1/4 of Britain's grain, seed and flour imports poured into the London docks. A fleet of floating pneumatic elevators discharged 2,500 tonnes an hour. At the mills, grain ship cargoes were discharged using giant vacuum suction plants. This massive operation would take 3 to 4 days to complete. Three 3 million tonnes of grain a year were discharged, loose or sacked, and transferred from ship to granary, granary to mills. Millwall Granary alone stored 25,000 tonnes. Every year, 860,000 tonnes of fruit and vegetables were landed in Canary Wharf from Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, Africa, Canada, South America and the West Indies. 8 million bushels of apples, 4 million hundredweight of oranges, all helping to make London one of the world's greatest fruit markets. Bananas from the West Indies. Tomatoes from the Mediterranean, the Canaries and the Channel Islands. Another arrival from the West Indies, a Tate and Lyle ship with a cargo of raw cane sugar. Tate and Lyle's Thames refinery was one of the biggest refineries in Britain, and it was set right in the heart of London's docks. The unloading of sugar was carried out relentlessly day and night, handling up to 3,000 tonnes in 24 hours. As well as producing for home consumption, Tate and Lyle also exported their refined sugar. To man all the ships, the docks had their own Board of Trade offices for handling crews for companies such as Union Castle, Federal, NZ Co, Blue Flues, Portline, Blue Star, British India, Glenline, Benline, P&O, Cunard, Shaw Savill, Royal Mail, Ellerman Lines, Harrison's and many, many more. They were all lined up along the quaysides for as far as the eye could see, resting in the misty light. They were surrounded by a heady fusion of multi-industrial smells, so uniquely characteristic of that London dockland scene. It was a special world, a secret world, a world that it seemed could never end. At Tilbury, one of P&O's famous Strathboats waited for her passengers to join her on a long and adventurous voyage to Australia. Over 200,000 passengers used the port every year, many experiencing the heart-wrenching moments of leaving their home, family and loved ones for the last time to start a new life on the other side of the world. What a magnificent spectacle those great liners made as they flew their red ensigns with pride and sailed in majestic splendour to those distant lands. Over 1,000 ships a week sailed in and out of the Port of London, carrying thousands of passengers and over 40 million tons of cargo a year. Famous ships like the Orion, seen here in Holland on the last leg of a North Cape cruise. The 23,696 gross ton Orion was the first major liner to be designed with just one mast. It was the first Orient liner to have a corn-coloured hull and was the Orient Line's answer to P&O's Strathboats. Here she is arriving at Tilbury. She was launched in 1935 and was considered to be the best decorated ship on her regular Australian service. With over 1,500 passengers aboard, there was a lot of baggage to get ashore. General Steam's Royal Sovereign, speeding past on her way from Southend to Tower Pier. Port officials and Orient Line staff board as soon as the Orion arrives in Tilbury's new entrance lock, anxious to get on with the epic task of clearing the great ship ready for general disembarkation. P&O's 20,846 gross ton Multan sets sail for Australia with some 650 passengers. Few of these people had ever seen a big ship close to, yet here they were climbing aboard to set off very, very nervously to embark on a new life thousands of miles away. Most would never ever return to their homeland or see their families and loved ones again. For all of them, that moment of actually setting sail was an extremely emotional event. But despite those sad farewells, the river had no time for sentiment. For her, the work was never done. Goods had to be carried to the many factories that lined its banks. So many ships demanded the handling of their cargoes that often they had to be berthed two abreast. outsider, it was magical how everything appeared to run like clockwork, with every port worker doing the job they had been painstakingly trained to do.
Me and my mate on the crane have worked together long enough for him to have gotten on to my signals and me to know just what he and his crane can do, see? From up where he sits, he can only see his load, his set we call it, as far as the edge of the ship's hold. After that, he can't see it no further, and I take over. For as I can see everything. I can look down into the ship's hold, and I can look up and signal my mate where he sits on his crane. It's all a matter of practice, really. Nothing will get broke so long as he keeps his eye on my signals. See?
As fast as ships were unloaded, so others came along immediately to take their place. Here's Canadian Pacific's Beaverdale, fresh in from Canada with rolls of paper and general cargo. Another ship loads rolls of paper from lighters for re-exporting to third world countries. In this busy landscape, great care had to be taken to make sure that no one fell into the water. It was so polluted that it meant instant quarantine in hospital. London's dockers were only too aware of this danger, but quite a few seamen, slightly the worse for wear after a few drinks at one of the dock's many boozers, did manage to step off the side of the quay, especially on foggy days. In the constant flow of traffic in Tilbury, the P&O's liner Chuzan set sail on a voyage to the Far East and Australia with over 1,500 passengers and crew. At 24,215 gross tons, she was an immaculate and magnificent sight as she left her home port. And when evening came, for so many ships it was high time for some rest. Palm Line's Ashanti Palm, home from Africa. Loch Ryan, just back from North America. The familiar yellow funnel of a New Zealand shipping company vessel standing proud over the nearby dockside houses. A great Union Castle liner. The cranes are finally still. Through the misty fog of dawn, back came the floods of sailors to their ships. Back in the freezing cold of winter, with the feeble sunlight barely breaking through the damp, smoky haze. But only a real pea super of a fog would bring normal working in the docks to a complete halt. There was nowhere to hide from that biting, choking winter chill. The air was always filled with that weird and captivating cocktail of smells. It was vital to the profits of the shipping companies that they didn't have too many of their ships in port for the long Christmas break. Everything possible was done to help the ships get to sea, although most of their crews would have been quite happy to have spent Christmas with their families and loved ones. When the docks did finally close for the holidays, there were still a few vital crew members left to look after their ships. The small local shops, pubs and the missions to seamen did their best to bring something of the spirit of Christmas to them as well. This unique centre of the maritime world was like a country in miniature. The government of those hugely complicated operations was carried out by the Port of London Authority. Formed in 1909, its task was to keep careful order in this tiny 69 square mile kingdom of the Port of London. Behind these windows and walls worked a dedicated corps of people who, through many ups and downs, through the horrendous devastation of the war years and the only too frequent industrial strikes, managed to keep the whole of its intricate machinery working. It seemed at that time that this model of ship handling efficiency in this self-contained and prosperous part of the great city of London would go on and on unchanged forever. To all who worked there, sailed in and out, or actually lived there, the Port of London felt as permanent as the River Thames itself. But no one could do anything about those ship-stopping smogs. Here in the late 1950s, the Federal cadet ship Durham struggles in the Channel to navigate blindly through the final few miles of her epic 6-month voyage around the world. But fog or no fog, the crew wanted their ship to look its best when it eventually did dock in London. The fog thickened further, and Durham's captain was forced to reduce her speed to barely 10 knots, but this was still perilously fast, for there were no designated shipping lanes in the English Channel in those days, and it took all the crew's seafaring skills to avoid a collision with any of the other 40-odd vessels that they'd sighted on their rather primitive radar screen. Every pair of available eyes was ordered to keep a sharp lookout. The crew of the Durham didn't want to miss their berth and have to lay at anchor outside the docks for several days waiting for another one. Even worse, if they were just a few hours late, the Durham's accounts would all have to be done again, a nightmare of a task. Many vessels were queuing ahead of them, and over the radio, ship's officers and the port and tug controllers were discussing the crisis.
Nathan, this is Arcadia. I'm now passing Middle Blind Point. Visibility 2 cables. This is ruddy fog. What is visibility in Lower Hope and Gravesend Reach? Over.
Arcadia, this is Plato. Visibility in Lower Hope is half a mile. Gravesend Reach is clear. Dredger opening.
Hello, plan gent. Stand by for the Tucson docking at midnight, going to number 13 King George. Over.
The ship slowed to take aboard a river pilot off Gravesend. Highly experienced in navigating the narrow channels of winding reaches, the pilot was essential to the ship's safety and a vital part of the port's overall operation. This was just one more careful shepherding of the staggering number of 60,000 ships a year that once carried their merchandise up the River Thames and into the enclosed docks of London.
Evening, Captain.
Evening, pilot.
Have a good trip.
Not bad.
Cold winter rain had by now replaced the choking fog as London's dockworkers made their way through the early morning gloom to help bring the ships into their allotted berths. The tugs took their charges skillfully through the dark and dangerous waters. The Sydney Star was the first ship on the tide to reach the Royal Docks. She'd reached the end of another long voyage, and with 11,000 miles of open sea behind her, the homely sounds and smells of London would have had her crew rising very early to pack for their journey home. Durham's sister, the Huntingdon, had also managed to get through the fog and make it to the Royal Docks on time to berth. London's dockers were being detailed very precisely to the ships they were to work on. Their lot had changed beyond all recognition since they were taken over by the Port of London Authority in 1909. They now had jobs for life, and it was very much a closed shop. The saying was you had to be family to get a job there. This gave the dock workers almost unrivaled security, but it also gave their unions tremendous power, power that was abused and only too often resulted in the call for everybody out, and another crippling strike erupted. This was certainly one of the key factors behind the final demise of those mighty inland docks. But for the time being, it was very good business as usual. The docks were full of ships of every shape and size and carrying every type of cargo imaginable. Huntingdon's cargo, including her wool from New Zealand, was rapidly delivered and piled high in the Royal Docks special wool sheds. There, Port of London Authority experts reclassified and graded the wool ready for the buyers, following the traditions of generations. Below the streets of London, huge vaults stored vast quantities of wine, where it was carefully tended by the cellarman. A flickering candle flame was the basic means by which they judged the quality and calibre of the wines. The wine was bottled at the Cutler Street warehouses. These huge buildings were haunted by the ghosts of the old East India Company, which had built them back in the 18th century. 10,000 bottles were filled every day, and there was room enough to store almost 1 million bottles. On-the-nose inspections of tea samples were made by the broker's inspectors. A wide variety of tea arrived in every cargo. Samples were taken by PLA experts and distributed around the vast tea market. Buyers accepted the sampling verdicts of the PLA experts without question. One of the biggest imports was tobacco, and in these warehouses the hogsheads were piled 5 high. Under the keen eyes of a customs watcher, samples were taken for distribution to the trade buyers, who spent £800 million a year. Those warehouses catered for just about every kind of cargo and had experts for each category. Here they check out priceless carpets from Persia and the Orient. Ivory from Africa is weighed up. There were even experts who could grade and categorize exotic ostrich feathers. The 1950s became a golden age of prosperity for the port, to such an extent that an ambitious new dock to the north of the Albert became a real proposition. It was an era of tremendous optimism, and people had great pride in their nation. There were jobs for just about everyone, and the future looked extremely bright and prosperous. As a measure of our manufacturing capabilities at that time, an average of 200 railway trucks and 200 vans arrived at this berth alone every day. Each one was loaded with exports, labelled proudly, "Made in Great Britain." "14,000 registered dockers and lightermen worked in the port, earning up to £60 a week, which in those days was a lot of money. 200,000 merchant seamen manned the British-flagged ships. and away from all the work, the pubs of Docklands had their own special atmosphere, packed with those hard workers, enjoying a good laugh and some lively music. And there were always more ships getting ready to return to the sea. Here, passengers are arriving to join Ellerman and Bucknell's 13,300 gross ton liner City of Durban as she prepares to sail direct to Cape Town on her maiden voyage. Just across the quay, the 17,000 gross ton Union Castle liner Kenya Castle is also getting ready to sail to Cape Town, but she'll be going via the Suez Canal and East Africa. This was a thriving era that people never expected to end. If anyone then had suggested that in a few years' time the Royal Docks would become the site of an international airport, they'd have been regarded as a complete lunatic. But the end of this world was nigh. By the early 1960s, the Royal's passenger liners had been ousted by the airliner. London's Docklands had lost their competitive edge. While they were still recovering from the devastation of the bombing during the Second World War, continental ports such as Antwerp and Rotterdam had been radically modernized and offered cheaper, more efficient services. In the 1950s, the cost of handling cargo in London was only 52 new pence per tonne. But the long-drawn-out seamen's strike of 1965 and the continuous confrontation between a weakened port management and the militant dockers leader Jack Dash had a devastating effect on the shipping companies, the port itself, and on the livelihoods of thousands of Dash's colleagues. By the 1970s, the handling cost of cargo had rocketed 15-fold in 20 years to over £8 a tonne. The Port of London had become too expensive to use and too unreliable to operate from. One by one, the shipping companies were forced to close up their operations and leave the port that had for so long been their base. By 1981, the Royal Docks were empty of ships and its many thousands of workers were gone. Today, an eerie silence hangs over parts of this landscape. Those who knew the bustling days of the Docklands are haunted by their memories of the waters that were once host to the greatest maritime spectacle the world has ever known. But this silence is deceptive, because nearby a revolution has taken place. Today the Port of London has come alive again in a very different way. Old, dilapidated warehouses have been replaced by modern factories, office buildings and houses, all linked together by a new network of railways and roads. It's also very much back in business as one of the busiest seaports in the world. Modern container handling facilities can now compete with any other port in servicing the new breed of ships that come upriver. These ships are able to deal with massive amounts of cargo in a matter of hours, work that in the past would have taken many conventionally designed ships several weeks to handle. Storage warehouses of today have been built for ultra-efficient operation and geared to handle freight with the utmost speed. Yet there are still to be found some of the great names and major landmarks of yesteryear. Tate & Lyle's famous works is still in Silvertown and has expanded to become the largest sugarcane refinery in the world. It's no longer a case of having hundreds of men shoveling sugar by spade. Tate and Lyle have invested millions of pounds and continue to pump in big money to ensure they remain the world's leader in this important industry. They still export the refined sugar by sea all over the world. The old enclosed docks may be long redundant, but everywhere you look on the river, there are small boats and big ships all working feverishly once again, handling just about every kind of cargo imaginable. Roll-on, roll-off ships discharge their cargoes of giant containers close to the network of modern motorways. Cars are still being shipped from the giant Ford factory at Dagenham. But the ships they are now loaded on have been designed to swallow them all into the holds in a matter of hours rather than days. Over the centuries, ships have of course got larger and larger, and that has meant that they've needed deeper and deeper water and have had to dock further downriver. One legacy of the past is the familiar name of the famous sun tugs, still waiting to be called to duty from the same places that they've waited in for generations. But the tugs of today are very different and very much more powerful. They need to be. Only the very latest state-of-the-art equipment will do for these tugs, a far, far cry from the damp, cold, smoky Thames tugs of yesteryear. The Port of London today handles far more cargo than at any time in its history. It now costs less to ship something from Australia than it does to transport the item a mere 20 miles inland by truck. This is the majestic sight of the sailing ship Lord Nelson, travelling up the Thames into the very heart of London, just as ships used to do centuries ago. For a moment we can recapture the magic of the old world as it passes by the new, and let our minds drift back to those days when over 60,000 ships a year sailed in those packed waters. But some things haven't changed. Today, Thames River pilots still disembark precariously from the ships they've just navigated safely to or from the open sea. Thankfully, this is a calm sea. You should see it in a storm. And as this pilot steps down onto the relative safety of his launch, he bids his charge bon voyage, just as river pilots have done for generations. For a fleeting moment, he remembers all those ships of days gone by. And the officers of the great Shell tanker also think back to the halcyon days of those many ships, when then they would have sounded their siren in traditional salute to the people and the ships of the great port of London.
Such a